Have you ever dealt with someone who always wants to be in control, never admits their mistakes, and twists words to make themselves look good? These kinds of people, manipulators, deceivers, and those full of pride, existed even in Jesus' time. But here's the shocking part. Narcissists hated Jesus. Why? Because he saw right through them. He exposed their lies, challenged their fake kindness, and refused to play their games. And guess what? Instead of changing, they tried to destroy him. But Jesus didn't argue or seek revenge. Instead, he used wisdom, silence, and powerful words that left them speechless. He knew their tricks and always stayed one step ahead. So, how did he do it? How did he handle narcissists without letting them control him? That's what we're about to uncover. Stay with me until the end because I'll reveal the secret ways Jesus exposed narcissists, how he responded when they tried to trap him, the lessons we can use today to deal with toxic people. If you've ever felt drained by a manipulator or wondered how to handle toxic people like Jesus did, this is for you. And hey, don't just watch. Join our amazing community. Show some love in the comments and let's grow together. Are you ready to uncover the truth? Let's dive in. Jesus was not a man of petty arguments. He didn't waste his time in endless debates with those who refused to listen. Yet without raising his voice or hurling insults, he exposed the pride and hypocrisy of narcissists in the most powerful way through silence, wisdom, and action. The Pharisees and religious leaders of his time were masters of manipulation. They twisted the truth, sought control, and demanded admiration. They constantly tried to trap Jesus with tricky questions, hoping to make him say something wrong. But instead of falling into their trap, Jesus responded in ways they never expected. One powerful moment happened when they brought a woman caught in adultery before him. They thought they had him cornered. If he said she should be punished, they would accuse him of being unmerciful. If he let her go, they would say he was breaking the law. It was a perfect setup, or so they thought. But Jesus didn't argue, he didn't shout, he simply bent down and wrote in the sand. The crowd grew restless, the accusers kept pushing for an answer. Finally, he stood up and said, "Let the one who has never sinned throw the first stone." Silence fell over them. One by one, they walked away, unable to respond. In just a few words, without insults or anger, Jesus had exposed their hypocrisy. This was his silent power move. He knew that narcissists thrive on reaction. They want arguments, attention, and drama. But Jesus refused to give them what they wanted. Instead, he used wisdom, stillness, and truth to leave them speechless. Even during his trial, when the Pharisees accused him with false charges, Jesus remained silent. He didn't waste energy defending himself against lies. His silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. This is the lesson. You don't have to fight every battle. Sometimes the most powerful way to expose manipulation is not with words, but with wisdom and restraint. Jesus was unlike anyone the world had ever seen. He spoke with authority, yet he was humble. He performed miracles, yet he never sought fame. He challenged the powerful, yet he had no army. And that's exactly why narcissists, the religious elite of his time, feared him. The Pharisees and other leaders were used to control. They loved being admired, obeyed, and treated as the highest authority. They made long, impressive prayers in public. They demanded respect. They set impossible rules for others but refused to follow them themselves. They wanted to be seen as holy, but in reality they were full of pride and deception. Then Jesus came along and he exposed them. Not by yelling or insulting them, but by revealing the truth they worked so hard to hide. He called them out for their hypocrisy, saying, "You are like whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside but full of dead bones inside." Matthew 23:27. That statement shook them to the core. No one had ever dared to speak to them like that. But Jesus wasn't afraid of them. He saw through their masks. He knew their hearts were full of greed, jealousy, and self-righteousness. And that terrified them. The more he spoke, the more the crowds followed him instead of them. The people started to see the truth. They didn't need these so-called holy men to reach God. Jesus offered freedom from their oppression, and that made them furious. They were losing their power. They tried everything to stop him, debating, trapping him with tricky questions, spreading lies. But nothing worked. So they made a final decision. Jesus had to be destroyed. They plotted his arrest, twisted his words, and pressured the Romans to crucify him. But even in death, he won. His truth could not be buried, and his message still exposes narcissists today. And that's why they feared him, because nothing is more dangerous to a narcissist than the truth. Jesus didn't just preach about humility, he tested people to reveal their true hearts. He had a way of asking questions and giving challenges that exposed whether someone was truly seeking God or just seeking power and recognition. The proud, the Pharisees, religious leaders, and those obsessed with their status were always trying to prove they were righteous. They loved to show off their knowledge, make long prayers in public, and demand respect. But Jesus wasn't fooled by outward appearances. He looked deeper, and when he spoke, he forced people to reveal who they really were. One of the greatest tests he gave was simple, yet powerful. Whoever wants to be first must be last and servant of all. Mark 9:35. This was a direct challenge to the proud. Would they be willing to serve others instead of being served? A humble person would accept this teaching, but a narcissist would resist it because they crave power, not service. Another moment that separated the humble from the manipulative was when a rich young ruler came to Jesus. He claimed to have followed all of God's laws, yet something was missing. So Jesus gave him the ultimate test. Sell everything you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me. Mark 10:21. The man walked away, saddened. He wanted the title of being righteous, but he didn't want to sacrifice his wealth. His heart was exposed. He wasn't humble, he was attached to his status and possessions. Meanwhile, the truly humble, fishermen, tax collectors, the sick and the outcasts, heard Jesus' words and followed him. They had nothing to prove. They didn't come to argue. They came to be changed. This was Jesus' ultimate test. Would people surrender their pride, or would they hold on to it? The humble were drawn to him, but the manipulative were exposed, embarrassed, and enraged. And that's why the proud couldn't stand Jesus, because he saw past their words and revealed the truth they didn't want to face. Jesus never backed down from the truth, especially when it came to exposing hypocrisy. He wasn't afraid to confront those who used religion as a mask to control and deceive others. And one of his most brutal truths came when he called the Pharisees whitewashed tombs. At first glance, this might sound poetic, but in reality, it was a direct, cutting attack on their fake righteousness. In Jewish culture, tombs were painted white to make them look clean on the outside, but inside they were still full of decay and death. By calling them whitewashed tombs, Jesus was telling these religious leaders exactly what they didn't want to hear. You appear righteous to others, but inside you are full of hypocrisy and wickedness. Matthew 23:27. This was one of the most shocking moments in Jesus' ministry. The Pharisees prided themselves on their holiness. They followed strict religious rules, prayed loudly in public, and demanded respect. But Jesus exposed their greatest secret. It was all an act. They didn't truly love God. They loved control. They didn't serve people. They used them. They didn't live by the laws they preached. Instead, they twisted them to their advantage. and Jesus unmasked them in front of everyone. The reason this confrontation was so brutal was because narcissists hate being exposed. They thrive on deception, on appearing perfect while hiding their true nature. But Jesus didn't allow them to hide anymore. He ripped off their masks with the power of truth. This moment wasn't just about ancient religious leaders, it's a warning even today. There are still people who pretend to be righteous while using others for their own gain. But just like then, truth always wins. No mask can survive in the presence of real light. And that's why they hated Jesus, because he saw right through them and he made sure the world saw it too. Jesus was a master at exposing deception, especially when it came to those who used power and manipulation to control others. He encountered narcissists in the form of religious leaders, Pharisees, scribes, and high priests, who were obsessed with status, appearances, and control. These individuals didn't serve God out of love or humility. Instead, they used religion as a tool to dominate people, feeding their own egos while pretending to be righteous. But Jesus saw through them, and he dismantled their tactics one by one. One of the most common manipulative tactics of narcissists is gaslighting, making others question reality to maintain control. The Pharisees constantly tried to twist Jesus' words, setting traps to make him contradict himself. They would ask him trick questions, such as whether it was lawful to pay taxes to Caesar, Matthew 22:17, hoping to force him into a lose-lose situation. But Jesus always responded with wisdom, exposing their deceit. Instead of falling into their trap, he turned the question back on them. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's. His answer left them speechless. They couldn't twist his words because truth always stands firm against manipulation. Another tactic of narcissists is playing the victim to gain sympathy and avoid accountability. When Jesus performed miracles, the Pharisees didn't celebrate or acknowledge the power of God. Instead, they accused him of breaking the Sabbath or even working with demons. They spread false accusations, hoping to turn people against him. But Jesus didn't waste time arguing. Instead, he exposed their hypocrisy by pointing out that they, too, performed work on the Sabbath when it suited them. Luke 13:15. He refused to let them twist his actions into something evil, showing that narcissists often project their own corruption onto others. Narcissists also use fear and intimidation to control those around them. The religious leaders had immense power and influence. They threatened people with excommunication, shamed those who challenged them, and demanded blind obedience. When Jesus healed a blind man, the Pharisees pressured the man's parents to discredit the miracle, but they were too afraid to speak out. John 9:22. This is what narcissists do. They create an environment where people fear speaking the truth. But Jesus did the opposite. He empowered people to think for themselves, to question false authority, and to seek real truth. He told his followers, "Do not be afraid of those who kill the body but cannot kill the soul." Matthew 10:28. Perhaps the most powerful way Jesus dismantled narcissistic manipulation was by refusing to engage in their power games. When he was arrested and put on trial, the religious leaders mocked him, spat on him, and tried to provoke him. Yet he remained silent when he knew their hearts were closed. Matthew 27:12. He didn't waste energy defending himself to those who had already decided to destroy him. Instead, he let truth, not arguments, be his defense. Jesus exposed narcissists by shining the light of truth into their darkness. He refused to be manipulated, he called out hypocrisy, and he empowered people to break free from deception. And that's why they hated him, because nothing threatens a narcissist more than someone who sees them for who they really are. Gaslighting is a manipulative tactic used to make someone doubt their own reality. It's a favorite weapon of narcissists who twist words, distort facts, and create confusion to maintain control. Jesus faced this constantly. The religious leaders, the Pharisees, scribes, and high priests, were experts at manipulation. They didn't just oppose him, they actively tried to trap him in his own words, twisting what he said to discredit him. But Jesus never fell into their deception. He responded with wisdom, clarity, and unshakable truth. One of the most striking examples of gaslighting happened when Jesus was asked about paying taxes to Caesar, Matthew 22:15-22. The Pharisees and Herodians approached him pretending to seek his wisdom. But their question was a trap. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? If Jesus said yes, he would seem like a traitor to the Jewish people who resented Roman rule. If he said no, they could accuse him of rebellion against Rome. It was a carefully crafted setup designed to make him stumble. But Jesus didn't take the bait. Instead, he asked for a coin and pointed to the image of Caesar on it. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. With one sentence, he cut through their manipulation and exposed their bad intentions. Another time, they accused him of breaking the Sabbath because he healed a man, John 5:1-16. This was classic gaslighting. They ignored the miracle. A man who had been sick for 38 years was healed, and instead twisted the situation to make Jesus look like the villain. They claimed he was a lawbreaker, but Jesus turned their logic against them. My Father is always at his work to this very day, and I too am working. John 5:17. He exposed their hypocrisy, reminding them that they too worked on the Sabbath when it suited them. Luke 13:15. Gaslighting loses its power when the truth is brought to light. Perhaps the most extreme example came during Jesus' trial. The religious leaders brought in false witnesses to distort his teachings, claiming he had threatened to destroy the temple. Mark 14:55-59. They took his words completely out of context, twisting them into something he never meant. This is what gaslighters do. They turn truth into lies and lies into truth. Yet Jesus didn't argue or defend himself. He remained silent. Why? Because he knew their hearts were already hardened. When someone is committed to misunderstanding you, no amount of explanation will change them. Jesus showed us the best way to handle gaslighters. Don't engage in their mind games. Stay rooted in truth. Let your actions speak louder than their twisted words. He never lost his peace, and in the end, his truth prevailed, while their lies crumbled. Sometimes the most powerful response is no response at all. Jesus understood this better than anyone. When faced with manipulative, arrogant, and deceitful individuals, particularly the religious leaders who sought to trap him, he often chose silence over confrontation. Not because he was weak, but because he knew their hearts were hardened, and arguing with them would be a waste of time. Instead of playing their games, he let truth, wisdom, and silence expose them. One of the most striking moments of Jesus' silence was during his trial before Pontius Pilate. The chief priests and elders hurled accusations at him, twisting his words and calling him a threat to Rome. Matthew 27:12-14. Pilate himself was amazed because Jesus didn't argue, didn't beg, and didn't even try to defend himself. He simply remained silent. Why? Because he knew these men were not interested in truth. They had already decided his fate. Nothing he said would change their minds. His silence left them unsettled, because narcissists thrive on control, and when you don't react, they lose their power. Jesus also used silence strategically when the Pharisees tried to trap him with difficult questions. In John 8, they brought a woman caught in adultery and demanded he judge her. If he condemned her, they could accuse him of lacking mercy. If he forgave her, they could say he ignored the law. But instead of answering immediately, Jesus bent down and started writing on the ground. He gave no reaction, no argument, just silence. The tension grew, and finally he spoke a single, devastating sentence. "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." One by one they walked away, humiliated. His silence, combined with wisdom, dismantled their manipulation. Narcissists want reactions. They feed on emotional responses, anger, fear, defensiveness, because it keeps them in control. Jesus never gave them that satisfaction. When they mocked him, when they demanded signs, when they challenged his authority, he often walked away or answered in a way that shut them down completely. He didn't waste energy explaining himself to those who were committed to misunderstanding him. Silence is not weakness. It's a power move. When faced with toxic people, sometimes the best response is no response at all. Jesus showed us that not every battle is worth fighting, and sometimes the greatest victory comes in refusing to engage, because truth speaks for itself, even in silence. Narcissists love to twist conversations in their favor. They set traps with loaded questions, hoping to corner their target. But Jesus was never caught off guard. Instead, he turned their own words against them, exposing their hypocrisy without stooping to their level. He didn't just avoid their traps, he made them regret setting them in the first place. One of the most brilliant examples of this happened when the Pharisees and Herodians tried to trap Jesus with a question about paying taxes to Caesar, Matthew 22:15-22. They pretended to respect him, saying, "Teacher, we know you are a man of integrity." But their flattery was a setup. Then came their trap. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? If Jesus said yes, the Jewish people would see him as a Roman sympathizer. If he said no, the Roman authorities could arrest him for rebellion. It was a no-win situation, or so they thought. Jesus saw right through their deception. Instead of answering directly, he asked for a coin. Holding it up, he pointed to Caesar's image and said, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's and to God what is God's." With one sentence, he completely shut down their trap. They had nothing to say. His answer was so perfect that even his enemies were amazed. Another powerful moment happened when the religious leaders challenged his authority, Mark 11:27-33. They asked, "By what authority do you do these things?" Instead of answering, Jesus flipped the question back on them. John's baptism, was it from heaven or from men? Now they were trapped. If they said, "from heaven," they would have to admit they had rejected God's messenger. If they said, "from men," they feared the people who loved John. So they refused to answer. Jesus had turned the tables, leaving them speechless. Jesus also exposed their hypocrisy when they brought a woman caught in adultery, John 8:1-11. They wanted him to either condemn her, contradicting his message of mercy, or let her go, contradicting the law. Instead, Jesus responded with wisdom. "Let him who is without sin cast the first stone." They had come to trap him, but instead he trapped them in their own guilt. One by one, they walked away in shame. Jesus never played by their rules. He saw the game they were playing and beat them at it with truth and wisdom. Narcissists thrive on deception, but truth always exposes them in the end. Jesus didn't just escape their traps, he left them ensnared in their own words. Jesus was not a people pleaser. He never felt the need to explain himself to those who had already made up their minds about him. Unlike many of us, he didn't waste time trying to win over toxic people or convince them to see the truth. When he saw hardened hearts, he walked away without fear, without guilt, and without looking back. One of the most powerful examples of this is in Matthew 15:12-14. The Pharisees were offended by Jesus' teaching, and his disciples came to warn him. Instead of apologizing or softening his message, Jesus simply said, "Leave them, they are blind guides." He didn't argue, didn't try to change their minds, he let them go. Jesus knew that some people don't want to be helped. No amount of reasoning or kindness can change a heart that refuses to listen. He demonstrated this when he spoke in parables, a method that confused the proud but enlightened the humble. Matthew 13, 10-15. When his disciples asked why he didn't speak more plainly, he explained that some people deliberately close their eyes to the truth. They don't want to change, and Jesus never begged them to. A striking moment of Jesus walking away happened in Mark 5:17. After casting demons out of a possessed man and into a herd of pigs, the townspeople were terrified of his power. Instead of celebrating the miracle, they begged him to leave. And what did Jesus do? He left. He didn't force them to accept him. He didn't try to prove he was there to help. He simply walked away. This is something many struggle with today. We think if we just explain ourselves better, if we just try harder, we can change toxic people. But Jesus showed us that's not true. Some people don't want the truth. They want control. And when they see they can't manipulate you, they reject you. Jesus also never sought approval from the powerful. When Pilate questioned him, hoping for a defense, Jesus barely spoke. John 19:9-11. He didn't try to justify himself to someone who had already decided his fate. He knew his worth came from God, not from the opinions of men. Walking away doesn't mean giving up. It means recognizing when your presence is wasted. Jesus never chased toxic people. He stayed true to his purpose and let those who rejected him walk their own path. And that's the ultimate lesson. You don't have to fix everyone. You don't have to prove yourself. You only need to walk in truth and let go of those who refuse to see it. Jesus was full of love and compassion, but he was not a doormat. He knew when to engage and when to set firm boundaries, especially with those who were manipulative, arrogant, or proud. Unlike many who feel pressured to be nice to everyone, Jesus showed us that true wisdom means knowing when to say no, when to walk away, and when to guard your peace. One of the clearest examples of Jesus setting boundaries was how he dealt with the Pharisees. These religious leaders constantly tried to trap him, twist his words, and provoke him into saying something they could use against him. But Jesus never allowed them to control the conversation. When they demanded a sign from him to prove his authority, he refused and said, "A wicked and adulterous generation asks for a sign, but none will be given." Matthew 16:4. Instead of playing their games, he left. Another powerful moment was when Jesus was brought before Herod, Luke 23:8-9. Herod was eager to see Jesus perform a miracle, treating him like an entertainer. But Jesus refused to speak a single word. He gave him nothing, no defense, no argument, no reaction. This was not weakness, it was strength. Jesus understood that engaging with someone who had no genuine desire for truth was pointless. Silence was his boundary. Jesus also set boundaries with those who only wanted his miracles, not his message. In John 6, after feeding the 5,000, the crowd followed him, wanting more bread. But Jesus confronted them, saying, "You seek me not because you saw the signs, but because you ate the loaves and were filled." John 6:26. When he spoke hard truths about being the bread of life, many walked away. And Jesus didn't chase them. He let them go. Even among his own disciples, Jesus set boundaries. When Peter tried to stop him from going to the cross, Jesus rebuked him sharply. "Get behind me, Satan. You do not have in mind the things of God, but the things of men." Matthew 16:23. This was not cruelty, it was clarity. Jesus recognized that even well-meaning people could become obstacles to God's purpose. Many today struggle with setting boundaries, feeling guilty for saying no. But Jesus showed that protecting your peace is not selfish, it is necessary. He didn't waste energy arguing with manipulative people. He didn't over-explain himself to those who had already decided to reject him. He spoke truth, set limits, and walked away when necessary. The lesson? You don't owe everyone unlimited access to your time, energy, or peace. Like Jesus, you can love people without allowing them to manipulate you. True love includes boundaries. Jesus was not just another teacher. He was a force that shattered illusions, exposed deception, and dismantled false power structures. And for those who thrived on control, manipulation, and pride, he was a direct threat. The narcissistic leaders of his time, the Pharisees, scribes, and corrupt rulers, feared him, not because he was violent or politically powerful, but because his truth was too strong for their lies. These religious leaders had built a system where they controlled people through fear, guilt, and rigid rules. They loved power, admiration, and the feeling of superiority. They wore extravagant robes, took the best seats in the synagogues, and made long, showy prayers just to be seen as holy, Matthew 23, 5-7. But Jesus saw through their act. He wasn't fooled by their outward righteousness. He called them out as hypocrites, blind guides, and whitewashed tombs, Matthew 23:27. What made them hate him even more? Jesus exposed them in front of the very people they were trying to control. When they tried to trap him with tricky questions, he responded with wisdom that left them humiliated. When they accused him, he turned the tables, revealing their own corruption. His words cut through their pride like a sword, and they knew that if people started listening to him, they would lose their grip on power. This is why they repeatedly plotted to kill him. It wasn't just about religious disagreements, it was about control. In John 11:47-48, after Jesus raised Lazarus from the dead, the chief priests and Pharisees panicked, saying, "If we let him go on like this, everyone will believe in him, and the Romans will come and take away our place and our nation." They weren't concerned with truth, they were afraid of losing their status. To them, Jesus was dangerous because he couldn't be manipulated. He wasn't afraid of them, he didn't seek their approval, and he didn't play by their rules. That terrified them. Their final act of hatred was arranging for his crucifixion, but even in death, they failed. What they didn't realize was that by trying to destroy him, they fulfilled the very prophecy that made him victorious. Their fear of losing control led them to commit the greatest injustice in history. But in the end, Jesus rose, proving that truth and righteousness always win over deception and pride. The lesson is clear. Narcissists fear those they cannot control. Jesus' power didn't come from worldly status, but from truth, humility, and divine authority, qualities that will always expose and defeat manipulation. The religious elite of Jesus' time, the Pharisees, scribes, and corrupt leaders, saw him as a threat. He exposed their hypocrisy, revealed their hunger for power, and refused to submit to their authority. They couldn't control him, so they sought to destroy him. But instead of attacking him openly, they used deceptive tactics, manipulation, and false accusations, the same strategies narcissists use today to silence those who stand for truth. Twisting his words. One of the most common tactics they used against Jesus was twisting his words to make him look guilty. In Luke 11:53-54, after Jesus rebuked the Pharisees for their hypocrisy, they became furious and began watching him closely, hoping to trap him in something he said. They would ask loaded questions, hoping he would say something they could use against him. In Matthew 22:17, they tried to corner him with a politically dangerous question: is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? If Jesus said yes, the Jews would see him as a traitor. If he said no, the Romans would arrest him for rebellion. But Jesus saw through their trick and responded, "Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's." Matthew 22:21. With one sentence, he avoided their trap and exposed their deceit, false accusations. When twisting his words didn't work, they turned to outright lies. In Matthew 26:59-61, during his trial, the religious leaders brought in false witnesses to claim that Jesus had said he would destroy the temple. But their testimonies didn't even agree with each other, a clear sign of desperation. Even on the cross, they mocked him with lies. He saved others, but he cannot save himself. Matthew 27:42. They wanted to discredit him, make him look weak, and turn people against him. Public shaming and character assassination. Jesus was constantly insulted, mocked, and slandered. They called him a blasphemer, Mark 2:7, a glutton and a drunkard, Matthew 11:19, and even demon-possessed, John 8:48. Their goal? To ruin his reputation so people would stop listening to him. But Jesus didn't defend himself or fight back. He let his actions speak louder than their words. He kept doing what he was sent to do: psychological manipulation. At one point, they tried to use fear and intimidation to silence him. In Luke 13:31, some Pharisees warned Jesus that Herod wanted to kill him. They hoped he would panic and flee. But Jesus remained fearless, responding, "Go tell that fox, I will keep on driving out demons and healing people today and tomorrow, and on the third day I will reach my goal." He refused to be manipulated by fear. Betrayal and corrupt deals. When all else failed, they turned to Judas, one of Jesus' own disciples. They bribed him with 30 pieces of silver, Matthew 26:14-16, to betray Jesus. This is a classic narcissistic move. When they can't take you down themselves, they find someone close to you to do their dirty work. Unjust punishment. Their final tactic was manipulating the legal system to ensure Jesus would be executed. They pressured Pilate, stirred up the crowd, and demanded his crucifixion. When Pilate hesitated, they used guilt-tripping and threats. "If you let this man go, you are no friend of Caesar." John 19:12. In the end, Pilate gave in, not because Jesus was guilty, but because of their relentless manipulation. The lesson? Narcissists fear the truth. They attack, lie, manipulate, and destroy those who expose them. But Jesus never wavered. He didn't waste time arguing, defending himself, or proving his innocence. He knew that truth always wins in the end. His enemies thought they had silenced him, but his resurrection proved that no lie, no deception, and no evil plan can ever defeat the truth. Not all of Jesus' enemies attacked him openly. Some were far more deceptive. They pretended to admire him, spoke to him with respect, and even called him teacher, but beneath their flattery was a hidden agenda. They weren't seeking wisdom, they were laying traps. This is a classic narcissistic tactic, fake praise to disarm their target while secretly planning their downfall. Jesus, however, saw through every one of their tricks. The Pharisees' insincere compliments. One of the most blatant examples of false admiration came when the Pharisees and Herodians approached Jesus with a seemingly respectful question. They said to him, "Teacher, we know that you are a man of integrity and that you teach the way of God in accordance with the truth. You aren't swayed by others because you pay no attention to who they are." Matthew 22:16. At first glance, this sounds like genuine respect, but their next words revealed their true motives. "Tell us then, what is your opinion? Is it right to pay the imperial tax to Caesar or not?" Matthew 22:17. They weren't admiring him, they were baiting him. If Jesus said yes, he would anger the Jews. If he said no, the Romans would arrest him. But Jesus saw right through them. He called them out for their hypocrisy and responded with one of his most famous teachings. Give to Caesar what is Caesar's, and to God what is God's. Matthew 22:21. The result? They were left speechless. Their plan to trap him backfired. Judas, the ultimate example of fake praise. Judas Iscariot walked with Jesus, ate with him, and called him Rabbi. But in his heart, he had already betrayed him. The ultimate act of fake admiration came in the form of a kiss. In Matthew 26:48-49, when Judas led the soldiers to arrest Jesus, he greeted him with a kiss and called him Rabbi. It was an act of betrayal disguised as an act of devotion, but Jesus wasn't fooled. He looked Judas in the eye and said, "Do what you came for, friend." Matthew 26:50. Even in the face of ultimate betrayal, Jesus remained calm and in control. They wanted to appear righteous. The religious leaders who opposed Jesus didn't just want to destroy him, they wanted to do it while still looking holy. In Luke 20:20, they sent spies to pretend to be sincere so they could trap him. In John 11:47-48, they admitted that Jesus was performing miracles, but instead of believing in him, they feared losing their power. They didn't hate Jesus because he was wrong. They hated him because he was right, and he exposed them. The lesson? Fake praise is a weapon. Narcissists use flattery to gain trust, lower defenses, and manipulate others. But Jesus shows us how to handle it. See through the deception, stay calm, and never compromise the truth. When people pretend to admire you but secretly despise you, don't fall for their words. Watch their actions. Truth is powerful. It shines light into darkness, exposes lies, and destroys illusions. And this is exactly why narcissists hate it. In Jesus' time, the proud and manipulative couldn't stand his words because he revealed their hypocrisy. Nothing has changed today. Narcissists, whether in religious circles, workplaces, families, or social settings, still despise truth because it threatens their control. Jesus' teachings continue to unmask their deception, and just like in his time, they react with defensiveness, anger, and even attempts to silence those who speak against them. The truth strips away their false image. Narcissists build their identity on lies, power, and perception. They need to be seen as righteous, wise, or superior. But Jesus' teachings tear down their false image. He said, "Nothing is hidden that will not be revealed, and nothing secret that will not be made known." Luke 8:17. This is a direct attack on the manipulative person's greatest fear: exposure. Just like the Pharisees, modern narcissists fear being seen for who they really are. They pretend to be kind, loving, or spiritual, but when confronted with truth, their mask cracks. This is why many narcissists claim to be good people while secretly harming others. They don't want accountability, they want control. Dealing with narcissists can be exhausting. They twist words, manipulate emotions, and try to control those around them. But Jesus faced them too, and he handled them with unmatched wisdom and strength. He never allowed himself to be trapped in their toxic games, nor did he waste energy trying to fix them. Instead, he responded in ways that left them powerless. If you've ever struggled with a narcissist in your life, here are practical strategies inspired by Jesus' example to help you deal with them wisely. Know who you're dealing with. Jesus never ignored the truth about people. He saw through their masks and called them out for what they were. He recognized their hypocrisy. Matthew 23:27. He knew their hearts were full of pride and deceit. Luke 11:39. He didn't waste time trying to change them. Matthew 15:14. Lesson: Don't be fooled by a narcissist's charm, false humility, or manipulation. See them for who they really are, people who will use you if you let them. Narcissists crave control. They manipulate, deceive, and twist reality to maintain power over others. Throughout his time on earth, Jesus faced relentless opposition from self-righteous religious leaders, power-hungry officials, and deceitful manipulators. Yet he never allowed them to break him. Jesus did not respond to narcissists with anger or desperation. He didn't argue for his reputation, seek their approval, or try to fix them. Instead, he disarmed them with wisdom, truth, and unshakable confidence. And in the end, he won. The ultimate trap. How narcissists thought they had won. The religious leaders of Jesus' time were classic narcissists. They demanded honor, sought praise, and loved being seen as holy, but inside, they were corrupt. Jesus called them out, exposing their hypocrisy in ways they couldn't escape. He called them whitewashed tombs, beautiful on the outside, but full of death inside, Matthew 23:27. He exposed their false righteousness. They followed laws for show but neglected justice and mercy, Matthew 23:23. He warned people not to fall for their deception, Matthew 16:6. Rather than change, they grew furious. Narcissists don't handle truth well. They knew they couldn't control Jesus, so they decided to silence him instead. Their plan? Public humiliation, false accusations, and a brutal death. They spread lies to turn people against him. They manipulated Pilate into sentencing him. They mocked him, believing they had destroyed his influence forever. They thought they had won. Jesus' unexpected victory, how he turned. Their attack against them. Narcissists thrive on control, but Jesus never played their game. Instead of defending himself in court, he stayed silent. Matthew 27:12-14. Instead of fighting back in anger, he forgave his enemies. Luke 23:34. Instead of proving himself to those who doubted, he remained secure in his purpose. And then the greatest reversal happened. The very thing they used to destroy him became the key to his ultimate victory. They thought the cross would end his influence, but it became the symbol of his eternal triumph. They thought death would silence him, but he rose from the grave in power. They thought they could erase his legacy, but his name is now above every name. What they meant for destruction, God used for glory. Why Jesus' approach still works today. If you've ever faced a narcissist, you know how exhausting their tactics can be. But Jesus showed us that true victory isn't about beating them at their own game. It's about standing firm in truth, no matter how they twist things, refusing to let their manipulation steal your peace. Walking away from toxic people without fear or regret. Letting your character, not your words, prove who you are. Trusting that justice will come in the right time. Narcissists hate what they can't control. They hated Jesus because they couldn't manipulate him. And they will hate you too if you refuse to play by their rules. But in the end, truth wins. Love wins. Integrity wins. Like Jesus, you don't need to fight every battle or prove yourself to those who refuse to see. Stand strong, walk wisely, and let your victory speak for itself. Jesus handled narcissists with wisdom, strength, and unshakable peace. He never begged for their approval, never engaged in pointless arguments, and never let them control his emotions.